Prussians' resignation in disgrace. Nebbe was the German representative on the International Criminal Police Commission, formed after World War I principally to track counterfeiters and drug smugglers across Europe's borders, and later known as Interpol, from its cable address. After the Nazis marched into Austria in 1938, they moved the Commission's headquarters from Vienna to Berlin, gaining access to 15 years of case files and suborning its original purpose of tracking counterfeiters and drug smugglers. Nebbe also helped adapt the mobile gas van, originally used in the Nazi euthanasia of mental patients, for mass murder in Eastern Europe to soothe the sensibilities of the Reich security chief Heinrich Himmler, who said he could not stand the sight of people being shot, even Jews. Nebbe proposed mobilizing the extensive roster of professional counterfeiters in his police files. His immediate superior was Reinhard Heydrich, protege of Himmler, the leader of the murderous SS, the Schutzstaffel, defense squadron, that began as the Nazi Party's armed militia. Heydrich was not in the least constrained by any legal scruples or even police protocol in rejecting Nebbe's proposal, but he excluded the use of police files lest this discredit Germany's control over the international police organization of which he was titular chief. Instead, he wanted to continue using the Commission's European network to track down anti-Nazis and Jews who had escaped from Germany. Heydrich also hoped to extend his reach as far as the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation in order to obtain U.S. passport forms for possible forgery. The FBI remained hesitantly in touch with the International Criminal Police Commission, breaking all contact only 3 days before Japan attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. However resistant he was about using criminal files, Heydrich was enthusiastic about the counterfeit plan from the start. As cunning as he was cruel, he was an avid reader of spy stories. He liked to sign his memos with the single initial C in the mode of the English espionage thrillers fashionable between the wars. It was, and in fact remains, the code letter for the chief of the British Secret Service. Heydrich's days were full of dark assemblings. He ran Himmler's Reichssicherheitshauptamt, RSHA, the Reich Central Security Office. It compiled huge files on Germans suspected of disloyalty or liberal connections, and, of course, on Jews, whose methodical extermination Heydrich planned and initially supervised. He had his office in the Gestapo building itself, and his SS intelligence network eventually rivaled and finally took over the Abwehr, the old-line military espionage service headed by Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, who had been first officer on the training ship on which Heydrich had sailed as a naval cadet. Heydrich was as physically self-confident as Himmler was shy and short-sighted. He was a skier, aviator, and fencer, and succeeded at whatever he did, even at playing the violin with fierce emotion, as he had with Frau Canaris as a young officer at the Canaris's musical evenings. Heydrich's inner tensions were betrayed principally by his high metallic voice, his harsh temper, and his night-clubbing habits in Berlin, where the women preferred his aides to the wolf-eyed officer with prodigious sexual appetites. The only serious objection to the counterfeiting plan came from Walter Funk, a homosexual former financial journalist, fat and well-fed, who served as Hitler's economics minister. Funk was the Nazis' principal liaison to German industry until the bitter end, and the titular head of the Reichsbank. He refused the use of the Berlin laboratories of the central bank's print shop, warning that the counterfeiting plan was contrary to international law and that it simply would not work. He was supported by legal advice from the military high command. Funk also demanded that fake bills be barred from Germany's conquered territories. He knew that the locals would dump Nazi scrip for what they thought were real pound notes. The last thing he needed while bleeding their resources for the Reich would be an infusion of forged pounds soaking up his overvalued and suspect occupation currency. Joseph Goebbels also found the idea grotesque. Einen grotesken Plan, as he wrote in his diary. But he did not reject it out of hand. A similar plan had already been mooted privately to Goebbels by Leopold Gutterer, one of his most imaginative deputies. On September 6th, Gutterer suggested dumping notes over Britain in quantities large enough to equal 30% of the currency in circulation. That would mean tons of paper for the overstretched Luftwaffe to carry. But it was the kind of mad scheme forever being dreamed up by Goebbels' own propaganda ministry, the megaphone for Hitler's big lies. The more often repeated, the more they stuck. Goebbels, a blindly devoted follower who had spread the Heil Hitler greeting among Nazi party members, was the only person with an advanced degree. He had a doctorate in philosophy, to remain in Hitler's immediate entourage throughout the war, and one of the very few with any college education at all. He confided his misgivings to his diary. But what if the English do the same to us? I will let the plan be further explored. Whether Goebbels was represented at the September 18th meeting is unknown, but he clearly was well aware that a whiff of counterfeit paper might blow away the Reich's finances. They were already stacked as delicately as a house of cards because Hitler had refused to endanger his solid bourgeois support by raising taxes to rearm Germany until the day after the war actually began. Despite the intense secrecy, word of the counterfeiting plan soon reached London. The Berlin meeting was outlined comprehensively in a letter from Michael Pallerat, chief of the British legation in Athens, and the very model of an English aristocrat representing his class and country. His daughter married into the ennobled family of Britain's World War I Prime Minister, Herbert Asquith. Pallerat's letter to London was marked "Very Confidential" and dated November 21st, just 2 months after the September 18th meeting, and contained material from the notebook of a Russian émigré named Paul Shurapin. Exactly how Shurapin had come by the information was not explained, nor were his sources named. He had been tossed out of Greece by the police in October and deported to France, where he could not be further interrogated. But his report was startling in both its detail and the level of its political and financial sophistication. During a conference of experts in monetary matters held on the 18th September of this year at the German Ministry of Finance, the following plan was discussed: offensive against sterling and destruction of its position as world currency. This plan, which was unanimously approved, contemplates in the first place the necessity of careful preparation and perfect execution of the work enabling the proposed aims to be realized in all the countries of the Near East, as well as in North Africa, in the British colonies, and in South America. It was decided to proceed with the printing and the printing works of the Reichsbank of 30 billions, of forged banknotes of £1, and of 2 milliards of various other notes. The transfer of these forged notes to foreign countries would be effected through the diplomatic bags of the Ministry of the Navy. The consular representatives of Germany of the above-mentioned countries would be charged with the disposal of this original merchandise in the most prudent manner. They have received instructions to try to obtain at first as much profit as possible until they receive the order to distribute the banknotes at a ridiculous price and even gratuitously, the main object being to flood the money markets with an enormous quantity of forged pounds. The plan contemplates the moment when these forged notes, in spite of their perfect get-up, will be discovered. This moment will be the one when the coup which is already being prepared will be executed in the largest exchanges of the world, in those of New York, Amsterdam, The Hague, Lisbon, Rome, Naples, etc., and which is to lead to the collapse of sterling or to its serious depreciation. To make the success of this coup possible, The Ministry of Propaganda is to start